When I was a kid, we lived in a large courtyard shared by several families. Next to our house was a road that connected two neighboring villages. About 200 meters away, there was a small burial hill with a few dozen graves. This is the background. The incident happened one summer in 1999. Speaking of 1999, there were so many supernatural events, including us signing a confidentiality agreement with alien invaders. The above is purely for padding. It was the corn harvest season. That evening it was getting dark. I was playing with a neighbor kid by the roadside outside the courtyard. I'll call him Dog Bro. He was 10 years old that year, and I was 8. Because it was too hot, I went inside to cool off by the fan, leaving him alone by the road. The adults were busy harvesting corn and didn't have time to check on what we were doing. About half an hour later, I suddenly heard a commotion from the adults outside. I ran out to listen and found out that Dog Bro had gone missing. The adults asked me, and I said Dog Bro was just by the road outside the courtyard. Everyone started shouting his name around the house. A few minutes later, we heard Dog Bro crying by the roadside about 200 meters from our house. The adults ran over and brought him back home. Later, I asked Dog Bro what happened. He said he couldn't remember what occurred at the time. The adults just warned me not to play by the road after dark, but I could clearly sense things weren't that simple. A few days later, I asked Dog Bro again about what happened. Here's the story from Dog Bro's perspective. Dog Bro said, after you went home, I caught a frog by the road and was about to head back. At that moment, a woman from the 3rd production team nearby, someone we often saw at the market, Yang So-and-so, told me it was dark and she couldn't find her way home. She asked me to lead her, since she was a familiar face. I didn't think twice and said, all right, follow me. Then I got all dazed and confused, leading her toward her production team's direction. But as we walked, Yang So-and-so suddenly said, you can go back now. I can find the way from here. All of a sudden, I heard my parents calling my name, and I snapped out of it. I realized I was by the road leading to the burial hill. I was so scared I started crying. Then my parents came to get me and took me home. You know the rest. After that, I told my grandparents what I learned from Dog Bro. It turned out they already knew. They told me that the woman from the neighboring production team, who asked Dog Bro to lead the way, had passed away a few days earlier and was buried in the burial hill nearby. At the time, both Dog Bro and I were staying at our respective grandmothers' houses, so we didn't know. The day after Dog Bro's incident, his family took him to burn paper offerings for that woman and had a Taoist priest draw a protective charm for him to carry. Later, when the adults were chatting in the evening, I heard them talk about a custom. After someone passes away and is buried, for 7 consecutive days the family must bring a torch to the grave to light the way for the deceased. Her family had finished her funeral rites, but hadn't completed the 7 days of torch-bearing before leaving to work elsewhere. Maybe because of this, she couldn't find her way back in the dark, and ran into Dog Bro. After this incident, for a long time we didn't dare walk that road, but the adults came and went as usual, probably because of their life experience. On a side note, in the past, when reading about such supernatural events, people who encountered them would often get a high fever or fall seriously ill. But Dog Bro didn't. He was just frightened. Maybe it's because his family went to pay respects. Leather shoes. This story happened when I was in junior high, involving a close friend from my dorm. One night, his parents had a big fight. A really bad one. So his mom, in a fit of anger, took him and left home. Since it was already late, and they didn't bring any IDs, his mom didn't take him to a hotel, but decided to stay at her company, which wasn't far from their house. At the company, after they settled in and were about to sleep, they heard the sound of leather shoes clacking on the stairs nearby, getting closer and closer. He was curious and looked through the peephole in the door. he saw a man who looked a lot like his dad, dressed similarly, walking toward them. He thought it was his dad coming to take them home. So he called his mom to look, but his mom, probably still angry, snapped at him to go to sleep, saying, "Nobody told your dad we're at the company. How would he know?" My friend didn't say anything and went to bed, but the sound of leather shoes clacking on the floor went from far to near, then near to far, as if the person had no intention of knocking. He was too curious, so he got up from the couch and looked through the peephole again. It was still that man, pacing back and forth in the hallway. Then he crouched down and looked through the gap between the door and the floor. Using the light from the motion sensor lamps outside, he saw a pair of white leather shoes pacing back and forth. But his dad never wore white leather shoes, and their family didn't own shoes like that. He felt something was off and called his mom again to look. This time his mom also sensed something wasn't right. After all, who would be wandering around an office building late at night? So she called the security office, asking them to check if someone was pacing in the hallway on the 15th floor, and if possible to ask that person to leave. A while later, the security office called back and asked his mom, "Did you report the wrong floor? From my surveillance, everything looks normal. I don't see any man." But his mom was certain it was the 15th floor. Seeing her insistence, the security guard agreed to send someone to check. But just as his mom hung up, there was an increasingly urgent knocking at the door, accompanied by shouts of, "Open the door! Open the door!" His mom tried to call the security office again, but her phone had no signal. She tried her phone and the company's landline, both had no signal. But their company was in a downtown office building. How could there be no signal? The knocking continued for about 10 minutes. Suddenly there was a loud bang on the door, followed by a sigh, and someone saying, "What a pity." Then the sound of footsteps gradually faded away. The motion sensor light in the hallway, visible through the door gap, slowly dimmed. By this time, he and his mom were so scared they could barely move. They sat frozen on the couch until daylight, when employees started arriving for work. Only then did they prepare to leave. Downstairs, it was the shift change between the day and night security guards. His mom went up to ask the night guard what had happened. The guard said he went to the 15th floor and found nothing. The hallway was quiet. To be thorough, he even checked the floors above and below and found no abnormalities. So he assumed everything was fine and went back downstairs. Their conversation was overheard by an older man who was coming for the day's shift. This man was on good terms with my friend's mom, the kind who'd chat when they ran into each other. He pulled her aside, and my friend followed to eavesdrop. The older man told her, in the early 2000s, the 15th floor was leased by a wealthy man who ran a company. It did well for a few years, but in 2008, during the financial crisis, his investments failed. Rumor has it his wife ran off with his last bit of money. After that, the man took his own life. Since then, some employees who worked late at night reported similar experiences to yours. You and the security guard are new, so you didn't know. But this only happens at midnight. During the day, there's nothing to worry about. Just make sure not to stay past midnight, and you'll be fine. After hearing this, I became terrified of the sound of leather shoes pacing. What are you afraid of?